The calm life of Mr. Phileas Fogg.
In the year 1872, in the busy heart of London, lived a gentleman who was unlike any other.
His name was Phileas Fogg, and though many people had heard of him, very few truly knew him.
He was a man of habits, of order, and of perfect punctuality. His home was in Savile Row, a quiet street known for tailors and fine houses.
The neighbors sometimes wondered about this man who seemed to live without change, without family, and without visible work.
Mr. Fogg's life was measured by the tick of the clock. He left his house at the same minute each morning. Returned at the same exact time each evening, and never allowed the smallest delay to interrupt his order. His meals, his reading, even his walks were organized with mathematical precision.
Some people thought he was cold and proud. Others whispered that he might be rich, but strange.
But the truth was simpler. Phileas Fogg valued calm, order, and discipline above all things.
Every day, at the same hour, he went to the Reform Club.
A private gentlemen's club where London's wealthiest and most respected men met.
To read newspapers, discuss important topics. The Reform Club on Pall Mall was a place of polished oak tables, red leather chairs, high ceilings, and the constant rustle of newspapers. The men who gathered there were politicians, bankers, engineers, and men of science. It was a temple of reason and respectability, where arguments were sharp but voices remained calm. There, Mr. Fogg spent hours reading and playing whist, a card game that required concentration and strategy. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were clear and precise. A new servant. On the morning of October 2nd, 1872, something unusual disturbed Mr. Fogg's carefully ordered life. His servant had left him suddenly, unable to endure his master's strict schedule and demands. Mr. Fogg, calm as always, simply placed an advertisement for a new valet. That same day, a Frenchman named Jean Passepartout arrived at Savile Row to apply for the position. Passepartout was about 30 years old, with a friendly face, lively eyes, and the heart of a traveler. He had tried many professions: singer, acrobat, firefighter, and even circus performer. When Mr. Fogg interviewed him, the conversation was short and direct.
Your name? Jean, but everyone calls me Passepartout. You wish to serve as my valet?
Yes, sir.
I am strong, punctual, and loyal. I left Paris because I desired peace and regularity.
Peace and regularity you shall have, said Mr. Fogg, without changing his expression.
My house is in order, and my habits never change.
If you serve me well, you will find this place most suitable. But Passepartout, once again in London, seemed to regain all his accustomed composure. After so many adventures, a life of calm sounded perfect.
He did not yet know how mistaken he was.
As soon as he entered his master's house, Passepartout noticed its unusual character.
The furniture was plain but elegant, polished until it shone. There were no pictures, no decorations, no family portraits. The only thing that seemed alive was the large clock in every room, all ticking in harmony. This is the home of a man who loves order more than life itself, Passepartout whispered to himself. He did not know that within 2 days he would be traveling across Europe, leaving London far behind.
That particular afternoon in October 1872,
A conversation arose in the Reform Club. That would change the life of Phileas Fogg forever. The news had spread through London. The Bank of England had been robbed of £55,000.
the thief had escaped, leaving the city in shock.
The newspapers speculated about his identity, though no one yet knew who he was.
Some members of the club spoke of the robbery while reading the Dane's paper. Others discussed the speed of modern travel.
New railways were being built in India, the Suez Canal had opened, and steamships were crossing oceans faster than ever before. Phileas Fogg sat quietly, as always, playing whist with his companions.
He seemed unaffected by the excitement around him. His calmness made him mysterious.
And some of the gentlemen often wondered if anything could truly surprise him.
One of the players, Mr. Ralph, set down his cards and declared, "The world is growing smaller every day."
Why, gentlemen? One might soon travel around it in a matter of months.
"Months?" replied Andrew Stewart, another member, laughing. "You are too generous, Ralph. With all these steamships and railways, one might do it in 8 days or even less." The group chuckled, but Stewart's words caught the attention of Mr. Fogg.
He raised his calm eyes from the cards and spoke in his measured voice.
80 days. It can be done.
A murmur ran around the table at these words, and the players paused, staring at the imperturbable gentleman.
Done? Nonsense! You cannot travel around the world in 80 days. It is impossible. On the contrary, it is entirely possible. I am prepared to prove it. The men leaned closer. You speak seriously, Fogg? I never speak otherwise. Then explain yourself.
Without hesitation, Mr. Fogg produced a small notebook from his pocket. Inside was a neat timetable, drawn up with precision. He spoke as though reciting a mathematical formula, listing each stage of the journey with exact times. Exactly 80 days. Then, with calm certainty, he concluded, "Total.
London to Suez, 7 days.
Suez to Bombay, out of town,
13 days. Bombay to Calcutta, how? 3 days. Hong Kong to Yokohama, maybe 6 days. Yokohama to San Francisco and Tányeť, 22 days. San Francisco to New York, per Promer, 7 days. New York to London, Köppen, 9 days. Total, 80 days. The men stared in astonishment.
You forget storms, delays, accidents. You count only the minutes of the timetable, not the accidents of life.
Accidents? I never plan for accidents. A true gentleman does not waste time on imaginary delays. The routes exist. The ships sail. The trains run. The journey is possible.
Impossible!
Even if you succeed in reaching India, the rest of the world will defeat you.
Shall we make it interesting?
What do you mean? I propose a challenge. I shall go around the world in 80 days or less. If I fail, I will pay you £20,000. If I succeed, you will pay me the same. A silence followed.
£20,000.
It was an enormous sum, enough to buy an estate or fund an entire railway project. For Fogg to risk so much showed either great confidence or great madness.
You are jesting.
Not in the least. Shall we say the challenge is accepted? One by one, the men agreed. They were curious to see if this eccentric gentleman would truly attempt such a ridiculous venture. A contract was drawn up and signed.
You will leave when?
Immediately. Today, October 2nd, at 8:45 in the evening, I shall take the train to Dover, and from there to Calais.
I shall return here to the Reform Club on Saturday, December 21st, at the same hour. Gentlemen, mark your calendars.
When Mr. Fogg returned to his house on Savile Row, Passepartout was arranging his master's wardrobe. The Frenchman had imagined a calm life with quiet walks and peaceful evenings. He had no idea what was about to happen. Passepartout, we are leaving in 10 minutes. Pack a carpet bag with 2 shirts and 3 pairs of stockings.
Bring my woolen coat and the traveling rug. Do not forget the banknotes. We leave for Dover. Leaving? Tonight? Yes. We are going around the world in 80 days. Around the world? In 80 days?
Precisely.
The Frenchman had dreamed of quiet. Instead, he was being thrown into the greatest adventure of his life. But he had no choice. He obeyed, though his hands trembled as he packed. At exactly 8:45 that evening, Mr. Fogg and Passepartout left Savile Row and entered a cab.
The horses' hooves clattered against the stones as they hurried through the foggy streets of London.
Gas lamps glowered faintly, and the bells of Big Ben struck the hour, as if to mark the beginning of their strange voyage. At Charing Cross Station, the train was waiting. Passengers hurried to their compartments, porters shouted, and whistles blew. Calm as ever, Fogg checked his watch, purchased 2 tickets, and boarded.
Mon Dieu! Here I thought I had found peace. I am off to the ends of the earth.
The train whistled and moved forward. The journey had begun.
At that same moment, another man was watching. His name was Detective Fix, an agent of Scotland Yard.
He had been following rumours about the Bank of England robbery. The description of the suspect, a tall, well-dressed
Englishman with calm manners, seemed to match Phileas Fogg.
When Fix saw Fogg and his servant board the train to Dover with such haste, his suspicions deepened.
Why else would a gentleman leave London so suddenly with a bag of banknotes?
Fix decided to follow them. He would keep a close eye on this mysterious traveler until he had proof. Thus, as the train sped into the night, 3 men were bound together by fate. Fogg, calm and determined, in timetables more than chance.
Passepartout, confused but loyal, who longed for peace but found adventure.
Fix, watchful and suspicious, who believed he was chasing a thief.
The stage was set for an extraordinary race against time.
The train from Paris rattled southward through the French countryside.
Fields of golden wheat and rows of vineyards rolled past the windows.
Villages with red-tiled roofs and small church towers flashed by as the train sped on. Inside the carriage, Phileas Fogg sat with his usual calm, his eyes occasionally glancing at the timetable in his hand. Passepartout, on the other hand, pressed his face to the glass like an eager child. He had never traveled so far from London, and every detail fascinated him.
The smoke of distant factory, the peasants gathering grapes,
the winding rivers that shone in the afternoon sun. Mon Dieu, I thought my master was a quiet man who lived only by his clock. Instead, he drags me across all of France within a day.
The train is on time.
When they reached Marseille, the air was filled with the smell of salt and tar. Ships crowded the port, their masts rising like a forest of poles against the evening sky. The Mediterranean lay before them, blue and endless. For Passepartout, it was a first glimpse of a world beyond Europe.
Within hours, they boarded the steamship Mongolia, which was bound for Egypt.
The Mongolia was a proud vessel, painted black with gleaming brass rails. Its tall smokestack belched clouds of coal smoke, and its engines beat with the rhythm of a giant heart. On deck, the salty wind whipped through the rigging, and gulls followed in their wake. Passengers came from many nations: English merchants, French officers, Indian officials, and travelers
Of every description. The deck echoed with different languages: English, French, Italian, Arabic, and more.
Passepartout at first struggled to keep his balance as the ship rocked gently. He leaned over the rail and groaned, if only the sea would stop moving. But soon, the fresh air revived him, and curiosity replaced discomfort.
He wandered among the passengers, asking questions, marveling at their costumes, and laughing at the strange mixture of accents.
At night, he stood on deck, gazing at the stars, brighter than he had ever seen in London. Mr. Fogg, by contrast, lived exactly as if he was still in Savile Row. He rose at 8, took breakfast at 9,
Walked for half an hour, then joined a game of whist with 3 gentlemen.
He read his guidebook at fixed hours and checked his watch regularly. He did not waste a moment on idle talk or sightseeing. My master travels the world, Passepartout thought, but he behaves as if he never left his armchair. Still, the servant admired his master, a man who never hurried, never faltered, and never seemed surprised by the world. Among the passengers was Detective Fix, an officer of Scotland Yard.
He had secretly followed Fogg from Calais, convinced that the mysterious gentleman was the thief who had robbed the Bank of England.
Fix kept a close watch, walking the deck at all hours, pretending to admire the sea while keeping Fogg in view. He noted every detail: the calm way Fogg handled his cards at whist, the exact change he gave the steward, the precise moments when he walked on deck.
At Brindisi in Italy, the ship stopped briefly to take on coal. While passengers stretched their legs, Fix hurried to send a telegram to London. Suspect has boarded Mongolia, bound for Suez. Please send arrest warrant to await him.
But the telegraph wires were slow. Messages crawled across Europe and the Mediterranean at the pace of old horses, not lightning. Fix feared that the warrant would not arrive in time. No matter, he thought grimly. I shall not lose sight of him. One mistake, one slip, and I will have my proof. Passepartout knew nothing of Fix's suspicions. For him, the voyage was a dream. He had never seen such clear skies, such blue water, such brilliant sunsets.
He laughed like a boy when he saw dolphins leaping beside the ship.
He clapped his hands when flying fish scattered like silver arrows across the waves. He stared for hours at the coastlines, Italy's rocky shores, the distant islands rising like clouds from the sea.
One evening he said aloud, "Ah, France, I miss you. But what wonders await me?"
Who could have imagined I would travel farther in 1 week than in all my life before? The young Frenchman also began to feel respect for his master.
Fogg never spoke unkindly, never raised his voice, and always paid fairly. He seemed cold, but he was never cruel. Passepartout thought, perhaps this journey will not be so bad after all. The port of Suez shimmered under the hot Egyptian sun. The steamship Mongolia had just docked after a week at sea, and its passengers were eager to step onto solid ground again.
Among them were Mr. Phileas Fogg and his servant, Passepartout, who followed his master with quick, lively steps. For Passepartout, Egypt was a dream he had never imagined. Golden sands, narrow streets full of camels,
And minarets rising against the burning sky.
For Mr. Fogg, however, Egypt was only a point on a timetable, a line in his carefully measured plan.
Mr. Fogg checked his watch as soon as he disembarked.
We are on schedule. Passepartout wiped sweat from his forehead, astonished by the heat and the new sights.
Mon Dieu! This is another world! Look, Master! Those domes, those palm trees, those camels carrying water! But Mr. Fogg only nodded politely. The train for Cairo departs in 2 hours. We must not waste time.
Passepartout sighed. His master was a man of precision, not of wonder. Still, he followed faithfully.
Not far behind, Detective Fix of Scotland Yard kept a careful eye on them. He had followed Fogg since the Channel crossing, convinced that the English gentleman was the very man who had robbed the Bank of England.
Suspect Phileas Fogg has arrived in Suez, traveling to Cairo by train. Please send warrant for arrest immediately.
Might not arrive before Fogg moved further east. That frustrated him, but it also strengthened his resolve. He would stay close, waiting for the right moment to act.
Meanwhile, he struck up a casual conversation with Passepartout, who was too trusting to doubt him.
Passepartout said proudly. We have already crossed France, Italy, and the Mediterranean. Next is India, then Hong Kong, then America, and back to London.
Fix nodded but thought to himself, this challenge is just a cover. He is escaping justice.
His determination deepened. He must stop Fogg at all costs. The train to Cairo began its long journey through the desert. It was a curious mixture of European technology and ancient landscape. The iron tracks cut across golden sands, while the wind carried whispers of ancient caravans that had once crossed the same routes.
Passepartout sat by the window, his eyes wide with delight. He pointed excitedly at every sight.
Look, monsieur, Bedouins on horseback, and there, a caravan of camels loaded with goods.
This land is full of wonders.
Mr. Fogg, on the other hand, sat upright in his seat, quietly reading his timetable and guidebook.
His expression never changed. At exact intervals, he glanced at his watch, confirming the train's punctuality.
After a while, Passepartout could not contain himself. Master, do you never feel amazed?
This desert, this sun, it is unlike anything in England.
Fogg looked up calmly. The world is wide, Passepartout, but amazement does not help us arrive on time. Still, Passepartout smiled. He admired his master's discipline, even if he did not understand it.
By evening, the train rolled into Cairo, the great city by the Nile. For Passepartout, it was a vision from a storybook. Narrow alleys filled with colorful markets, the sound of merchants calling out, and the fragrance of spices, coffee, and roasted meat. Donkeys and camels shared the streets with carriages.
Minarets pierced the sky, and the call to prayer echoed across the rooftops.
Magnificent. I never thought I would see such a place with my own eyes.
Mr. Fogg, however, moved with steady steps. He walked straight to the ticket office to confirm their passage on the next
Train to Suez, where a ship would take them toward Bombay, India. Time was everything. Detective Fix shadowed them through the crowded streets. He kept silent, but his thoughts burned. If only the warrant arrives in time.
That evening, Fogg allowed Passepartout a short walk through the bazaar. The servant marveled at the lamps that glowed in
Things that glowed in the dark, the craftsmen hammering brass, and the storytellers gathering children around them. To him,
Cairo was alive with magic.
But his master was already preparing for the next stage. He calculated the hours, the distance, and the connection.
we are still on schedule. If no delays occur, we will reach Bombay as planned.
Passepartout nodded, though in his heart he wished for more time to explore. Still,
He respected his master's mission. This was not a holiday. It was a race against time.
the next morning, as they prepared to leave Cairo, Fix approached Passepartout again. This time he spoke with false friendliness.
You are fortunate to serve such a master. But tell me, do you know why he is in such a hurry? Why he risks so much money?
Why, of course. He is a man of honor. He has made a challenge, and he will win it. You will see.
Fix smiled but thought, the servant knows nothing. I must catch the master myself.
He then secretly wrote another telegram to London, repeating his request for the arrest warrant. He was determined to delay
Fogg in Egypt if possible, but Fogg's strict schedule left little chance.
The time soon came to leave Cairo and return toward the Red Sea, where their ship waited. Fogg
bought the ticket, checked his watch, and guided Passepartout back to the stations.
As the train pulled away, Passepartout leaned out of the window, waving at the city that had enchanted him.
Goodbye, Cairo. Perhaps one day I shall return. Fogg closed his guidebook and said quietly, "Onward to India." Behind them, Fix followed, his determination stronger than ever. The great adventure was only beginning. The sun was rising as the steamer Mongolia left the port of Suez. Its engines turned steadily as it entered the narrow waters of the Red Sea. For many of the passengers, this was their first view of the desert coast of Arabia. Endless stretches of golden sand and rocky hills shimmered beneath the sun. The air shimmered with heat, and the cries of seabirds followed the ship as it pressed southward. The Mongolia pressed southward toward the Indian Ocean. For Phileas Fogg, the departure was no different from the turning of a page in a timetable. He checked his watch, compared it with the ship's clock, and then calmly opened his guidebook.
He noted the distance to Bombay. His entire fortune depended on such calculations.
And yet his face showed no trace of worry.
Passepartout, however, was in awe.
The world grows larger every day.
He leaned over the rail, gazing at the growing immensity of the world.
And yet, he thought, my master behaves as if it were only another street in London.
To him, the journey was routine over. To his servant, it was the world itself unfolding.
The days at sea soon developed their rhythm.
The passengers dined at fixed hours, strolled on deck during the cooler mornings and evenings,
and played games of cards to pass the time.
Continued his habit of playing whist, winning or losing with equal calmness.
As though the game itself mattered more than the money.
Passepartout, meanwhile, enjoyed exploring the ship. He spoke with sailors, asked questions about the engines, and admired the skill with which the crew managed such a vast machine. At night, he often stood on deck, gazing at the stars, wondering how far from Paris he had already traveled.
Among the passengers, however, Detective Fix kept his watch. He observed every movement of Fogg, never relaxing his suspicion. Each day he hoped for a message from Suez or Aden that would confirm the arrest warrant, but none came. The telegraph lines were still too slow, and his frustration grew.
Through the Red Sea, the Mongolia sailed down the long body of the Red Sea,
Passing barren coastlines and the occasional Arab dhow with its triangular sail.
The heat became oppressive, and the air thick with salt and dust. Many passengers hid below decks.
But Fogg continued his measured walks at the exact same hours, no matter the weather. Passepartout, sweating heavily, fanned himself with his hat.
Does my master not feel this heat?
He muttered. But when he asked, Fogg replied only, "The temperature is of no consequence, provided the timetable is maintained."
In truth, Fogg's willpower was a mystery to everyone.
He treated heat, cold, and distance all as minor inconveniences compared to the precision of his plan.
After several days, the steamer reached the port of Aden, at the southern tip of Arabia.
The ship stopped to take on coal.
Passepartout was allowed to disembark for an hour.
For him, every sight was exotic, every sound a discovery. Fix, too, went ashore, though his eyes searched not for wonders, but for telegraph offices.
Still no reply from London. He clenched his fists. The warrant must arrive in Bombay, he told himself. It must! Meanwhile, Fogg remained on the ship. He spent the hour writing in his notebook,
calmly recording the time of arrival and departure, and calculating how many hours remained until Bombay.
For him, the stop at Aden was simply another entry in his careful schedule.
The Mongolia now left the narrow seas and entered the wide Indian Ocean. The air grew fresher, the waves larger, and the horizon endless. For the first time since leaving London, Passepartout felt the true immensity of the world.
At night, the ship cut through waters sparkling with phosphorescence.
Dolphins raced beside the bow. Passepartout clapped his hands in delight, calling other passengers to watch.
Even Fix, though troubled, could not help admiring the sight.
The voyage across the Indian Ocean lasted 13 days. The weather remained fair, and the engines of the Mongolia worked without failure.
Each sunrise brought them closer to India.
Fogg's calm never broke. He played cards, walked the deck, and read his guidebook.
Finally, the morning came when the coast of India appeared on the horizon.
At first it was only a thin blue line, then the shapes of hills, and finally the towers and domes of Bombay. The crowded harbor was alive with ships from every nation, from British steamers to Indian dhows and Chinese junks. On the docks he saw elephants, oxen, and endless lines of workers carrying goods.
This is truly another world.
Fogg, however, stepped ashore with his usual calm.
He checked his watch, confirmed the departure of the train to Calcutta, and walked straight toward the ticket office.
Fix followed closely, his heart beating faster.
But when he checked at the telegraph office, again there was nothing.
The warrant must arrive in Bombay.
It must!
The delay was unbearable, yet he could not abandon his chase.
Passepartout, meanwhile, begged his master for a few minutes to see the city.
Only a little time, monsieur, he pleaded.
Fogg, calculating the hours, agreed to give him 1 hour before the train departed.
Passepartout ran into the streets like a child at a fair. He saw people of every dress and color. The smells of spices, incense, and dust filled the air.
He watched musicians playing strange instruments, while dancers spun and clapped.
He bought a few small trinkets as souvenirs, thinking of the stories he would tell in Paris.
But he also noticed the differences in custom.
When he entered a Hindu temple out of curiosity, the priests shouted angrily and drove him out, for his shoes had polluted the holy ground.
Red-faced and confused, he fled the temple, chased by the priests' shouts.
He realized that traveling the world meant not only seeing new wonders,
but also respecting unfamiliar traditions.
At the appointed time, Fogg and Passepartout boarded the train bound for Calcutta.
The carriages were crowded, the heat stifling. But the train represented the modern power of the British Empire in India.
For Fogg, it was another link in the great chain of his plan.
For Passepartout, it was the beginning of an adventure he could scarcely imagine.
As the train pulled out of Bombay, Fix stood on the platform,
torn between anger and determination.
The warrant will arrive in Calcutta, if not here, he swore.
And so, boarding the same train, he continued his pursuit. The great subcontinent of India lay before them, with its vast rivers, dense forests, and crowded cities.
For Fogg, it was only the next stage on the timetable.
For Passepartout, it was the heart of an extraordinary journey. For Fix, it was the chance to prove his suspicion.
The adventure pressed on. The following morning, Mr. Fogg, Passepartout and Detective Fix, though the latter still uninvited, stood on the platform of Bombay's Grand Train Station.
The air was hot even at dawn, filled with the sounds of vendors shouting and engines hissing.
The newly built railway line was a marvel of British engineering, stretching eastward across India.
It promised to carry travelers from Bombay through the jungles and plains to the holy city of Allahabad and onward to Calcutta on the banks of the Ganges.
Phileas Fogg purchased the tickets without hesitation, his calm face betraying no excitement.
Passepartout, however, could barely contain his amazement.
He had never seen so many different people together in one place. British officers in smart uniform,
Indian traders carrying bales of cloth, women in colorful saris, and pilgrims with walking sticks and copper pots.
India. It is more wonderful than I ever imagined.
Fix kept close to the pair, pretending to be another traveler. In reality, his eyes never left Fogg.
Waited for the arrest warrant from London, hoping it would arrive in time. Until then, he resolved to follow Fogg wherever he went.
The train gave a long whistle, steam poured from the engine, and the carriages shuddered. With a cry from the guard, the journey across India began.
At first, the train sped past the crowded streets of Bombay, where ox carts mixed with carriages and wandering cattle. Soon, the scenery changed. Palm trees waved gently in the breeze. Villages with mud houses and thatched roofs appeared, and farmers worked in the rice fields, their feet sinking in the water.
Passepartout could not sit still. He leaned out of the window, pointing out temples with tall spires and monkeys leaping across the branches of banyan trees. He laughed like a child at every sight, while his master sat quietly, reading a newspaper. Mr. Fogg, do you see that? A whole herd of elephants. Enormous beasts, bigger than any horse. Yes, elephants are used for carrying loads in these. They are reliable animals.
Passepartout sighed. His master could find a way to make even elephants sound ordinary.
Meanwhile, Fix sat in the next carriage, pretending to admire the view.
In truth, he wrestled with doubt.
The more he studied Fogg, the more he wondered. Could such a calm and polite gentleman really be the daring thief who robbed the Bank of England?
Yet everything about the man's journey, the haste, the large sums of money, the determined silence, seemed suspicious. If only the warrant would arrive. Until then, I must remain his shadow.
For 2 days, the train traveled smoothly, stopping at small stations where merchants sold spiced tea, rice cakes, and fruit.
Then, on the third day, the train slowed unexpectedly. Passepartout, who had just fallen asleep, was jolted awake. Excuse me, could you explain why we've stopped here?
Attention! The line ends here.
All passengers must leave the train.
Confused, Passepartout looked out the window. They were in the middle of the jungle. A small village stood nearby.
But beyond it stretched endless forest.
Fogg calmly asked the conductor for an explanation.
Sir, the railway company promised to finish the track all the way to Allahabad.
From here, there is no railway for 50 miles.
50 miles. In this heat. On foot. Impossible.
We will find transportation.
In the nearby village, Fogg made inquiries.
Ox carts and horses were available, but none could travel quickly across the rough jungle paths. A guide mentioned that an elephant was for hire. The animal, named Keone, was large and strong.
The price is high. £2,000.
2,000 pounds. Why, that is robbery.
Time is more valuable than gold.
The elephant was saddled, and a skilled mahout joined them as a guide. Slowly, Keone moved into the dense jungle, carrying them toward Allahabad.
The jungle was alive with sound. Birds of bright colors screeched in the treetops.
Insects buzzed like tiny drums as Keone moved deeper into the jungle. Occasionally, a tiger's roar echoed in the distance, causing Passepartout to clutch the saddle tightly.
"Do not worry," said the mahout calmly. "Tigers rarely attack elephants." Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, and the air smelled of flowers and spice.
They passed small villages where children stared wide-eyed at the foreign travelers on the great elephant. Fogg remained calm, studying his watch frequently to ensure they were still on schedule. Fix, on the other hand, grew restless. Every hour that passed felt like a chance for his suspect to escape justice. On the second day of their jungle crossing, they heard distant cries. The mahout slowed Keone and raised his hand. On the second day of their jungle crossing, they heard distant cries. The mahout slowed Keone and raised his hand.
Listen. The voices rose higher and higher until they came to an open space. There, they found a young woman lying unconscious, her face deathly pale.
Fogg decided to rescue the woman. And he made a plan. Aouda was the daughter of a wealthy merchant, driven into tragedy after her husband's death.
You have saved my life.
No thanks are necessary. It was the right thing to do.
Monsieur Fogg, you are the bravest man I have ever known.
Even Fix, though still suspicious, felt a grudging respect. He had not expected such courage from his so-called criminal.
With Aouda now part of their group, the journey to Allahabad continued. Keone carried them steadily until at last, after days of hardship, the railway line appeared again. Fogg paid the mahout generously and released Keone to him, with Aouda seated safely beside them.
The party boarded the train once more, bound for Calcutta. Fogg had lost money and time,
but he had gained something far more valuable: a key, a human life saved.